Hello, everybody, once again. This is Tim Didabo, and this is Creatives Flow with a VO. Well, today is going to be a really, really special one, certainly for me, and I know by the time you're done listening to this, it will be for you too, because today is kind of a masterclass in what we call creativity. Why do I say that? Because Jeff York doesn't just do one thing creatively. No. When I met Jeff, he was an art director at J. Walter Thompson in Chicago, and he was busy running from one thing to the next because he's so damn good at what he does. But no, it doesn't just stop with advertising. Jeff became and still is a premier caricaturist. Is that a word? I think so. Or Yorkatures. Jeff's caricatures can be seen in magazines, newspapers, and on the walls of some stars, as he will tell you. People have wanted the original pieces to pass out as gifts. People like Spike Lee, Steven Spielberg, Tom Hanks. I mean, this guy is a rock star. But no, it doesn't stop there either, because he also has become a movie critic. Oh, did you think I was done? No. But wait, there's more. Yes, because Jeff has also become a screenwriter, and that too is something else he'll talk about. So yeah, like I said, a masterclass on the word creativity. And I know this is the longest intro I've ever given, so without further ado, Mr. Jeff York, folks. You look exactly the same when I met you 30 years ago.
Well, you do too, except maybe a touch more gray, but then again, who isn't, right?
Right, exactly. Well, there is that.
So great to see you.
You too. This is so neat, man.
Likewise, I agree. Yeah, this is great.
I didn't know you had your own podcast too, so that's kind of neat.
Well, I did. It's been done for a couple of years, but I did it for 3 years, and I think 50 weeks out of the year I did it. So yeah, it was. I think I remember doing it during the holidays even. So it was a lot of fun talking to different screenwriters about a current movie that was out and finding out what their take on it was and where we thought the story was working or the film was doing good by the story, et cetera, et cetera. But eventually they couldn't afford me anymore, even though it wasn't that expensive to do. But
okay, so they did have to pay you for that gig.
A little bit, but but they ended up, there's been a few things like that. I'm sure you find that even in your work that sometimes people want you, but then they don't quite have the funds for whatever, and even sort of sometimes the basics. So
right,
that happened a couple of times with me as a film critic. I was a film critic at Creative Screenwriting for almost 3 years, and eventually they didn't make enough money to be able to pay as many writers as they had. And I was a regular writer twice a week, so I was the first one they looked at and said, "Well, shoot, can we do 2 of his reviews a week?" No, we cannot.
No.
But
not
but
if you're not paying my price.
Well, exactly. And I always find people who can pay, and they're always great, and work that until you can, which is sort of how any of it works. But it is funny how sometimes, you think something as simple as a podcast, we were not doing it for YouTube. It was just talking. And then they somehow can't make that work. It's like, well, what are you budgeting? Do you have a budget? What did you spend too much on Starbucks coffee every morning? Come on, make your own. Don't penalize me and my followers.
That's right. There's always that, right?
Exactly. It's like, what are you really spending your money on? Tell me, because I'll find ways you can pay me.
Right. Yeah, of course it's Starbucks. What else would it be?
Of course. And, you think about that. What is that, $8? Or by the time you had a scone on there, it's probably 10. And then you tip. Come on. There's the money right there.
That's right. And we as we're watching reports about how to pay people that work for Walmart now.
Oh, I know. Isn't that funny? And, we still don't want to pay minimum wage. And it's like, I always say, if you're a bar owner or restaurant owner and you can't pay 4 waitresses minimum wage, then you're either charging too little for drinks or you don't know how to manage a restaurant,
right.
Period.
Right. Or you're
not
really
that much.
Freaking greedy.
That's exactly what it is. See, that's the thing. It's always the greed.
I'm pretty sure the Waltons are doing okay. They don't need too much more money.
That's right. It's always the greed factor, isn't it? It's crazy.
Yeah, and they're buying back all their stocks. They literally are buying back all their stocks.
I know. Isn't that sad? But not as sad as Elon Musk. I mean, that clown, what is he thinking? I'm sure he's glad that he's gone out there and said some crazy things now and driven his golden goose into the toilet,
Well, and here's the thing that I think about that. Instead of him spending, what did he spend? $3 billion, $4 billion to buy?
Yeah, something crazy
to buy Twitter.
Yep.
He could have invested that money in what they're trying to do right now with Fusion.
Yes. Hell, he could have saved all the children who are starving in the planet probably for that kind of money. And
Oh, easily.
I mean, there's that something that could be on his gravestone rather than, vainglorious fool that's
Right.
going to be leading his obituary paragraph now, which is
Tried
crazy.
to save Twitter. That's what it'll say.
Exactly. It's like really, I remember reading back in the day when all was said and done on the Iraq War, and that fight, which we ended up staying there for how many years and all that crap, that they could have solved world hunger and paid to eradicate it in every country twice with the money they spent on, or something like 2 or 3 times over with the money they spent in just whatever 7 years that was. And it's like, you think about that. I mean, we could have gotten rid of that kind of problem and instituted programs where people in other countries would be shown how to make their own food so they wouldn't starve, or, school programs or whatever the hell it is to help people. And people spend their money on dumb things like buying Twitter or wars that didn't need to be fought and such. It's insane. It really is.
It's all vanity projects. I'm
is.
sorry, but if I had $100 billion, that's exactly what I'd spend my money doing.
Totally. I mean, even if I had $100 million, like, would I want to make Avatar 3, or would I, well, nothing against James Cameron or the Avatar films, but I mean, think of what you could use money for in this world rather than necessarily those kinds of things. I mean, nothing wrong with Avatar 2 or Avatar 1 for that matter, but I always think of the 100 films that could have been made for the price of that one.
No, and it's not doing great.
Right, exactly. It's like, it's kind of the same old thing. And I don't know if people want to wait 12 years for sequels anymore. I mean, granted, 36 years later, Top Gun somehow captured the box office.
Yep.
Right. But that's the exception, not the rule.
Right.
So
Absolutely not. Especially not after that many years have passed.
Right. I mean, they're lucky Tom Cruise is still doing his own stunts, still looks like he's 12.
Yeah, right.
Speaking, or Tim, he looks like Tim over here,
Bastard.
the boyishly handsome leading man that he is.
And here we are. I really truly started it out for selfish reasons. And that was,
I love that,
because I was wondering, how can I get back in touch with my friends, especially during COVID? How can I get back in touch with people, A, I'd like to meet, or B, that I haven't seen in a while?
Oh, I love that.
We couldn't have lunch. We couldn't hang out. And I was like, I've often wondered, as long as I've been in this business, where the hell did they come up with these ideas?
Yeah,
sure. How much pot was smoked? When you came up with a talking bag,
Right.
Dude, what
Different
if the bag talked?
Characters. Yeah, right. It was talking to me last night. I
That's
swear.
what I mean.
Yeah,
so where do
exactly.
these ideas come up? I was like, at that time I was listening to a lot of podcasts.
Sure.
And I started listening to voiceover podcasts, and it was always a voiceover teaching other voiceovers, or a voiceover interviewing other voiceovers. At the very best, it was a voiceover interviewing agents or casting directors, never creatives.
Yeah. Always about like how to get into the business as opposed to necessarily how to succeed in the business.
Right.
Or maybe once you're in the business, what do you do to keep it going and be successful? Somebody like you, who is one of the top guys in the business. And, I think the fact that you're curious enough to try something new, do a podcast, do a different angle on it speaks to the reason that you are successful at this. You're paying attention, you're in the moment, you're aware of what's going on. And, it's kind of a river. You never step in the same river twice. So you have to kind of keep realizing what's swirling around you, to torture the metaphor even more. But that's the way it is, and I think you've done that with all of your career, let alone this kind of venture. And I think anybody who's creative knows that they, kind of the only constant is change, as the cliche goes.
Right. Well, and the funny thing about that change is, I liken being a voice actor or an actor to a suit of clothes. Okay. The wide lapels are out now, but baby, in another 10 years, keep that thing in the closet, because in another 10 years, you're going to be back along with the wide tie. So the thing is,
we're still waiting for that white tie. I want the All the President's Men look.
There you go.
The big, long, thick collars and the even thicker tie.
Well, I mean, look what happened during Mad Men.
Exactly.
Well, on that note, because you got some gold in there already.
All right, I love it.
I'm going to get on my little silly list of questions.
Sure. They were good, very good questions. I love them.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I was like, okay, what do I ask this guy? Because it's been so long, and there's just so much. You have so much history So
True.
So tell us a bit about yourself, who you are, and what exactly you're doing, and what you've done and what you do.
Sure. Well, I'm Jeff York, and I've been in the advertising business for over 30 years. I'm currently working at Leo Burnett as a writer. It's been a lot of fun. I used to be a creative director and sort of run accounts and travel all over the world. And that was great for the time that it lasted. But then I did some other things and kind of mixed and matched and sort of blended a lot of different things together. I like to write scripts and have optioned some screenplays. I can tell you about how Steven Spielberg almost bought one of my scripts in a couple of minutes. As well as I've always liked to draw and illustrate. And one of the reasons I gravitated towards advertising and discovered it when I was in a small town in Wisconsin where I grew up called Lomira, Wisconsin, about 700 people when I was growing up, is I was trying to figure out what I could do with an art talent because there weren't a lot of art careers other than art teacher or sculptor and painter. I didn't really know what there was, but I did watch Bewitched as a child and I understood that there's advertising. And it seemed at the time that, wow, that must be what advertising is like. You just come up with these great ideas and then they sell Coca-Cola or dog food or detergent or whatever.
Or your wife Samantha helps you sell it.
Exactly. She comes up with all the ideas. It's always somebody else. The account guy always takes responsibility and takes credit for things that really are just the creatives. No. And then I got into advertising and realized it was much more complicated than that, but yet there were still the Larry Tates in the world. So they were informed on, the Yes Men and some of those kind of things. But when I was looking up advertising in high school, Tim, I realized that it was one of those professions where it was a regular paycheck. They had healthcare and dental, and you got to work on a lot of different kinds of things. And it was all the things I liked. It was acting. It was jingles and songs. It was writing. It was drawing. It was photography. It was film. It was illustrations. It was, sort of points of views and, sort of short and pithy. You didn't have to spend a ton of time on everything. Like I always wondered about people who make movies. They spend 5 years on a film and then it comes out, nobody likes it. It's like, well, you got 5 more years to show that you can still do it, but you've got to come up with a new one where if I die, my campaign dies or my client doesn't buy my idea or something, goes away after 6 months or whatever, there's always 10 other things to do. So it seemed like a good profession and it's been a fun profession the whole time. But, I've also been interested in other things, some of those same things that are found in advertising, but I also discovered I have always liked cartooning and caricaturing. So I started doing illustration of that, illustrations for the Tribune back when I started in advertising. So there's been not just parallel paths, but kind of various different sort of paths, a little bit here, a little bit there, still mainstreaming as, the main business of advertising where you and I worked together and knew each other well. But those other things have been fun, supplemental things, not only for sort of my ego or for my paycheck, but, just things that I'm interested in exploring. And I think art is art and creativity is creative. And you can find ways to pot a plant that's creative, or you can find other outlets to use your curiosity for the human condition and find ways to express it.
Now, were you a copywriter as well at J. Walter when I met you, or only an art director? I didn't know you were writing as well.
Well, get this. I was an art director. I know. I started as an art director. In fact, I went to art school in Minneapolis and Chicago, and I was hired as an art director. And I think that's given me, an insight because, to be able to visualize things and sort of think of it in sort of the bigger picture where a visual has to be sort of the main thing that kind of gets it across is very key. That informed me as I've always enjoyed writing, whether it was in high school, college. I was the editor of my school newspaper. But the funny thing is the first award I won was actually for a radio campaign I did when I was first at Campbell Methune. They didn't have a lot of writers, and they needed some help with a couple of stray assignments. And this one came up that was for the American Egg Board, and I wrote a radio campaign for it. And it ended up winning a bunch of awards, and they flew me to New York for the Festival of Radio Awards and all that kind of stuff. So from that time on, I have always kind of blended the two a little bit together. I haven't really delineated the lines. I've worked with great writers who are also great visualists and great ad guys, period, full stop, even though technically maybe John Barry was the writer or I was the art director or whomever I was working with.
Brilliant guy.
But but for me, it's always been about we're a creative team, and sometimes you might come up with a visual and I might write the right line or vice versa. And sometimes it's us putting it all together in the mixer. So for me, it's always been that. But eventually, as I became higher up the food chain and creative director, it's a lot less on the board stuff. So you're writing presentations, figuring out the strategy with the planning people and the account people working hand in hand with the clients. So that became a lot more of, for lack of a better term, writing skills more than necessarily drawing or putting down the pictures. And then that sort of became a little bit more of my thing. And I think with the success of writing reviews, which I started doing about 12 years ago, as well as writing scripts, it just became more and more of kind of a writing thing. And then people started to get to know me as a writer. And unlike you, Tim, they don't even know that I was an art director at one point. A lot of times it comes up, people go, "You were an art director?" It's like, yeah, now you know why I can come up with the visuals pretty well. Not that writers can't, but it always has helped.
Right. Well, and it seems to be, at least back then, I'm sure it's even more so now. It was always a collective soup between you and your writing partner, or in your case now you're the writer. And, I think because you're so diverse, Jeff, I think there's so much that you add to any picture,
Oh, you're very kind.
Well,
Thank you.
Let's face it, dude, your skills as an artist are just out there crazy. So
well, thank you.
I've always been fascinated by your work. And, I don't think I ever got a chance to work with you personally at J. Walter, but I probably worked on some of your stuff. I didn't know you were at Burnett. That's great. Are you freelancing, or are you on
No,
staff?
I started freelancing there, and then they hired me. So it's been 2 years now almost, which has been really fun and great. Yeah. But actually, Tim, we have worked together on some stuff. I mean, maybe not official clients, but I know you've come in for animatics and different things like that. And I've done stuff over the radio with you. And, certainly you've worked on, and you've certainly worked on stuff that I was a creative director over. And I said, hey, the guy you should hire is that Tim guy. He's terrific. But yeah, that's one of the things too that I got to miss a little bit as I became a creative director, as I wasn't as hands-on. And so some of the things that were really fun, like directing actors and sitting with them, wasn't always in the cards.
Now, I assume you came to Chicago for work originally, or better pizza?
Well,
I don't know.
Actually came here. Well, I started in school at art school in Minneapolis, and then I transferred to Chicago after 2 years. So I was here, and I kind of knew that Chicago was one of those places that I would probably either end up. I like the Midwest. It was really Minneapolis, Milwaukee, or Chicago. And then because I finished Chicago school here, I decided to look in it was a big ad community, and got a job right before graduation, a couple months. So I kind of went from ending art school to going right into Campbell Mithun, and kind of the rest is history, as they say. But yeah, I've had opportunities to go to LA and Chicago for advertising, but there was so much that I was doing in Chicago for most of the time at J. Walter Thompson, managing numerous accounts and always something new going on and different people, that always felt like a new agency. So I was there for 20 plus years. And then I sort of started freelancing at the same time that I was doing other things, like concentrating more on film reviews, writing scripts, doing more illustrations. I started to illustrate some books. I've illustrated 6 books now, which is fun too. I mean, that isn't enough to always make a go of it every year, but when it does happen, it's
your
a fun
books or
venture.
Or for someone else?
Other people's books.
Okay.
Yeah. Illustrations for somebody else's writing. And so, yeah. So that's all the more wonderful when they call you, because it's not, well, I'm writing it and saving money on the illustrations by doing them myself.
That's right.
But it's like, oh no, I've been called to do the illustrations. So that's always sweet.
Awesome. Okay. So now we have to get into the doodling.
Yes.
Doodling. Did that start on I would imagine it started on a Trapper Keeper.
Well, it's funny.
It's millions of dollars for you.
Well, it's funny because it was, I think, influenced by a couple of things. One is both my mom and my dad were good artists. They didn't pretend to be artists, but they could draw.
Sure.
And so they would show me a little bit how to draw. And they always denied this, like, oh, no, we didn't really have that talent. It's like, I can point to things that you did and showed me, and then had a sense of it. So they had a certain sense of creativity. But I'm also one of those kids who grew up on cartoons. You come home after school in second grade and cartoons are on. And I just thought they were hilarious. And I knew that they were a little bit more mature and adult. And so it became a very cool thing for me. Like, not only were they funny drawings, but what was the social satire, or who were they doing parodies of?
Sure.
Do you remember the Ant and the Aardvark? I mean, I remember knowing in 6th grade that was a John Biner who was imitating both Dean Martin and Joey Bishop. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh my God, they're doing, and then who's Joey Bishop? Well, he's this guy who's on The Tonight Show and night television stuff a lot. And I just thought that was kind of fun. And then, of course, as is naturally the trajectory, I started to be able to cartoon classmates and teachers and do little doodles. And then they became a little bit more elaborate and detailed. And it was funny because I did caricatures in high school and I did the teachers, and it was kind of a badge of honor. They wanted to be drawn, like
Sure.
he noticed me or he knows how to draw me. And mine were never mean. A lot of times kids who do that stuff will draw insulting cartoons and hang them in the locker and nobody sees it. For me, it was always kind of a way to glorify them. And I've always sort of kept that approach. Part of it is celebrity culture, but I believe in sort of celebrating people. So as I've done caricatures over the years, I was drawing for the Tribune for many years. I did Richard Christensen's column Arts Afield
Sure.
for 3 years, running every Sunday, and drew people at work and stuff like that. I've always thought it was a way to say, hey, I've noticed you, you're interesting. It's kind of like, an audience noticing the character that somebody's playing or what an actor is doing, somebody like yourself with your talents, and then sort of playing it back to them in a way, glorifying them through line. And my favorite compliment I've ever gotten is a good friend of mine, Charlie Galley, who was an art director for many years in the business, said when he sees my characters, he can hear the person. So I always love that. Like if you can feel enough of the personality to sort of hear them or sense them, because I think anybody can kind of draw a face and get, the parody of the nose and the chin and do the characters to accompany my movie reviews. I think it helps me tell them how the film impressed me and maybe impress upon you that part of what I'm trying to get through in my review or my drawing.
Right. I mean, I loved the one you just did for the Banshees.
Oh, thank you.
That was wonderfully drawn.
Thank you.
And just so you guys know, and I'll touch on that in the opening, but what Jeff does is he actually doodles TV and movie stuff. And his stuff can be seen pretty much everywhere. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Did I see you in a United Way magazine? Or United
yes.
Airlines
I used to draw
or...
for United. I was a regular contributor to the Tribune, United, Ladies Home Journal, W Magazine. I actually did the 7 or 8 columnists for Automobile Magazine. They had a little cartoon that accompanied each of their columns every month for, I think, 2 or 3 years. So I used to be in there all the time and do different things.
I remember grabbing a magazine from the back of somebody's seat. I was like, there's
there
Jeff York's work.
There he is. That's funny. I can't escape him.
Son of a gun. Cha-ching. Cha-ching. So when did that start to become monetized for you? Is it right out of school or, when you started taking off in the ad world?
Yeah, it was a little bit of both. I mean, I had done some stuff, Tim, in college. Like I had done the parties. And I remember famously I was working the National Press Club at Minneapolis, Minnesota, the night that Ronald Reagan won, and they declared him the victor at like 6:30. So everybody else was drunk by 7 because there was nothing to report, and they all came over streaming to me to get drawing, and so I was drawing and making some money to put myself through school in that kind of way. But I think through connections in advertising, like I met Vince Kamen and then Ann Albrecht, and they were interested in repping me because they had seen some of the drawings that I'd done of people in J. Walter on the walls, and they said, well, you should be doing this, as a freelancer, part-time. And I had done some, but then, I had Ann as a rep for a while, and Vince too, but they were together. And then Ann broke off and repped me separately. But they got me the Tribune gig, which, like I said, I drew for Christensen for 3 years and continued to draw for the Tribune. I'd say about 7 or 8 years off and on. I did their art section a lot of times, sometimes their covers, various things in the tempo section. And so it was always a nice supplemental income. And I've always kind of, done movie posters, saluting the movie year through caricature and different things like that. And, obviously at Christmas time, people ask me to draw their cards or family members or certain things like that for various people. Cool. But, now it's kind of one of those things where because of the movie reviews, people are seeing it more. And the more that gets exposed on Rotten Tomatoes and different places like that, drawing for Pipeline Artists. I'm a contributor there twice a week, writing essays about writing and arts in the film world and stuff like that. And I always draw my own drawing for because I figure, well, that stands out and that gives them something a little extra special as well that they can sort of then utilize and make hay of. And sure enough, it gets me connected to people. A lot of times when I post on my site or Instagram, Facebook, whatever, the movies blog, people see it and they'll ask for it. Or, celebrities have my work. I've been commissioned by them. I've had them buy stuff. One time I was finishing up at work. I was freelancing and I checked my Instagram and Black Klansman had just come out and I put up my caricature of Black Klansman.
What a great movie
it was. A great movie to accompany the review of it. And I'm looking at it and suddenly there's a little ding and I see a comment and it says, who's the artist? And it was from the real Spike Lee. That was his thing. And it's like, shoot. And I said, the film critic. And he goes, oh, you wrote that nice review and did the drawing? I said, look at the name. And it's like Jeff York. And then he says, can I DM you? It's like, sure, Spike, go ahead. So he DM'd me and asked for it, and he bought the piece from me. He's got 3 pieces of mine now hanging in his offices. I did the Five Bloods and Black Panther for him, and other.
Only if I get to meet you and get a picture.
I know. Well, that's the funny thing is I haven't done that yet. I've talked on the phone with some of the people I've done commissions for, but sometimes they'll ask, sometimes they'll hire me for something else. A friend of mine, 2 friends of mine who are in New York, Ron Fassler and Doug Heston, have known plenty of celebrities that when I've drawn them or the Broadway show, they've given to them. One night I got a call from the cast of 9 with Antonio Banderas. It was the revival of that a number of years ago, maybe, I don't know, 13, 14 years ago by now. But after the show one night, I get a call and it's like, hello, this is Antonio Banderas. Is Jeff York there? It's like, yes, this is he. It's me and the cast of 9. And we want to thank you for the caricature that Doug Keston left us. And then Cheetah Rivera gets on and Mary Stuart Masterson. It's like Jane Krakowski gets like,
how cool of them to do
I
that.
know.
I mean, they could have just taken the thing and said, yeah, thanks a lot. This is really cool. But no, they took the time to call you.
I know. It's really,
which is
really
really
nice,
special, man.
I'll tell you one quick story, and then we can, if you want to ask about the Spielberg one. I know this sounds like it's all about name dropping, like, Tim DeDuff.
Dude, this is your show. You tell me all the stories you want. It's your show.
One time I saw the revival of Man of La Mancha with Brian Stokes Mitchell, and I drew it and I sent it to him. And kind of like a little, I don't want to say fan letter, but I really was impressed by your show so much that I wanted to draw it, and I do these kind of things. And so here's that. And he called me that day that he got it. And he goes, I can't believe you sent me this. He looked me up, found my number, called me, and he said, this is Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio's last evening performance. Tomorrow's our matinee. I'm going to cross the street and getting one of the prints that you sent. Like I gave him the original plus like 10 prints so he could give it to others. And I'm framing it as my going away gift to her. So, and we kind of corresponded for a little bit after that. And some other people have sort of been nice about remembering me or coming back for more or whatever else. So yeah, it's made some nice connections, which is wonderful.
Oh, and it should. Here's the thing. It's not just good. It's really original.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, it's very. I mean, it's like one of those. For me, as we lost Jeff Beck, one of my comments was there are certain guitar players where the minute you hear them strum their guitar,
yeah,
you know who it is.
Right.
Within a few strums of the guitar, I know it's Santana. I know it's Jeff Beck.
Sure.
I know it's Alex Lifeson. I mean, I know who it is. And for you, as soon as I look, I go, that's a York. Or somebody ripping his style off.
Well, that's sweet of
you. But it's got your name on the bottom, so,
Well, one of the things I've done, too, lately, Tim, is I used to do a lot more work in color. Like when I was in United Magazine, I was doing color. But that takes a while. And now with, work and different things sort of getting up there is taking more time. I've gone to black and white, first of all, because it's more convenient. 2, because it's fast and easy to reproduce, and you don't have to worry about like, well, is that color going to translate when they printed that kind of stuff? Black and white always prints pretty well. And the other thing too is it's very unique now. There's just not a lot of it going on. When I was growing up, there was the black and white drawings in Mad Magazine and Al Hirschfeld and some other people. The editorials. I mean, now really the only place you see black and white drawings are in like the New Yorker or political cartoons, if those are still around. But even political cartoons have started to add color because they think that's what they need to do to get people to take a venture. But I found with the concentration of the line drawing and using line and those scribbles or whatever as you doodles, as you say, to create textures and different kinds of hair.
I mean, really, it's what they are,
yes, and the simplest lines to get across somebody's expression or personality, I find is a little bit more unique, and the simpler and more black and white and sort of obvious it is, I think it stands out, which is nice.
I guess I'd call yours caricadoodles.
Yeah, there you go. Somebody said one time Yorkatures, but I didn't want to copyright that.
I like it.
Yeah, it was pretty good. I like that line. But I thought, well, a lot of times people have to figure out how to spell or understand what the word caricature is anyhow. A lot of people write it caricature with the like character with a chur on the end. And it's like, no, it's with a C-A-R-I.
You need an I in there.
So I just kept, yeah, that's right. So I've always kept it just, hey, if you know what the word caricature is, you're halfway there and you've impressed me. So good for you.
I never wanted it easy. I ask my wife.
Well, it hasn't aged you. You still look as handsome and youthful as ever. So, and look at your success. I mean, you're incredible. So one of the guys who can say he's been in this business 30 years and been really at top of his game and one of the top success stories since the very beginning.
I still love it. I mean, I think that's why I've stayed with it. I think people get frustrated and they leave it, or they lose their way.
Sure.
Or they forgot why they got in it in the first place.
Right.
I didn't get in this business. First of all, I never wanted to be number one because there's only one way to go from number one.
Yes.
If I can stay right in the middle, that's what I said. Just let me stay right in in the top 10 or the top 20, I'm good.
That's really something though, nationwide, and you have. And you're so talented, and your energy and enthusiasm and pluck, is evident here just listening to your podcast and looking at you as you're talking to me.
Thank you.
Let alone being across from you, directing you in a booth where your talent and
Thank you.
Energy is totally contagious.
Jeff, it's not a humble brag, man, but it's coming from you. It's really nice to hear that.
Well, it's very true.
You're a master of your craft as well, sir.
Well, thank you.
So how did the movie critic thing come about? Did that just fall in your lap, or is it something you created yourself?
Well, it was funny. It was something that people had told me. I was kind of that kid in college because I'd go to the movies a lot, and people say like, "Well, what movie did you see this weekend? What did you like?" And then some people said, "You should write this stuff down." And there's these things called blogs, and you don't have to be hired by a newspaper or a magazine anymore, and all that kind of stuff. I thought, well, that's interesting. But then I realized, if you do that, you have to kind of keep it up. So I couldn't just start it and say, well, I did it, but man, after 3 months, it became a grind,
Yeah.
But I really like movies enough. And I thought, if I'm going to do this, this has to be kind of an elevated hobby. Like I have to really make a go of it and start doing it. And sure enough, I started doing it, and about, 4 or 5 months, 6 months into it, the Examiner called me. Remember the Examiner online?
I sure do.
They called me and they said, hey, we've seen you're doing criticism online in Chicago, and we need a horror movie critic. And we know that you write a lot about horror movies. That's when you're interested. Would you want to be our horror movie critic? And I said, sure. And then after a few months of that, we talked about, hey, we've got a couple other guys who do it, including Don Shanahan, who's a friend of mine and the president or one of the head guys who started the Chicago Indie Critics. And we'd like you to do film critiques of other movies if you want. So I said, yeah. So I did that for a few years. And from that, kind of the rest started to fall into place. Like, from there, I got the creative screenwriting gig. I got some other freelance things, made some contacts through the screenwriting world that also were interested in me helping them with I won a couple of contests for the International Screenwriters Association. So they asked me to do the podcast for them, talking to other writers about movies. And I made a great connection with the people who run Script Pipeline. I've been figured in their finals, I think 6 or 7 times in their top 10, and became friends with Matt Misitich, who is one of the head guys there. And then he started Pipeline Artists Online, this magazine about creativity, and asked me if I wanted to contribute to that. And I said, yeah, and I'll draw for you too. And so, it kind of, I think it's a very word of mouth industry in a little bit in a way. And then by the time somebody said, you should really be in Rotten Tomatoes, that's going to broaden your reach. And even though I was read in, I dare say, 27 countries, I mean, it's not like I've got 2 million followers, but generally my whatever they call the quality eyeballs is around 40,000 a month, which isn't bad, considering people are reading.
You guys need another show. We need
people
another
reading me in England.
Show.
I know, I tell you. But so I got into Rotten Tomatoes, which was really nice, and then that sort of just begats other stuff. Then people notice you, and my drawings help get noticed, and writing regularly. I've known critics who've come in and done it for a couple of years, and then they're out of it because they've got other interests, or they move on to different things and stuff like that. But I've always kind of, the stuff I'm interested in, Tim, I've always kept at it. Same with you. It's less of a vocation in many respects and more of a passion. Advertising is a great vocation, but for me, being able to work with other creative people and sit in a room and come up with all kinds of ideas, and you hit all these different pieces of medium and media and stuff like that, that's so fun. And to make a career at it, great. Same with writing movie reviews or drawing. It's something I would want to be interested in, or am interested in anyway. So I might as well do it, make some money on it, or at least make it an elevated hobby. And all that's kind of come together. The script writing was a little bit different. That came from we like your insights into movies, and you sometimes will write about where a movie should go. Have you ever thought of writing a movie? And I thought, well, I'll write one. So I sat down to write a horror movie that I wanted to see because I saw so many of them as the Examiner's horror movie critic, and a lot of them were terrible. I thought, they don't have smart protagonists. They don't have understandable antagonists or dimensional ones. And what if this, what if that, what if this? And I wrote a vampire story about a guy who chooses to become a vampire because he's contracted ALS and he's given this sort of death sentence. And he meets this woman who he likes. He's attracted her. She's an interesting person. And she just so happens to be a vampire. And she says, I can save you from that fate worse than death, even though this is a version of death, but it gives you everlasting life. And that to me was an intriguing premise. I'd never seen somebody in all my years of watching horror or vampire movies, somebody who decided to become a vampire for a sort of noble or life-saving reason, not because, they fell whim to the intoxicating sense of love or whatever hormones or whatever the hell the hormones or whatever the hell the pheromones the guys are putting out. And it won a bunch of awards. It was called Incurable, and it's kind of gone around. People know of it. I've come that close to making it a few times, but at that time, Script Magazine found it and gave it its only recommend of spec scripts that year. I think it was like 2010 or whatever it was, and that was like over 1,000 scripts, and they kind of opened some doors for me. I got an agent, I got a manager, and I've been through a couple different ones like that, but I ended up helping somebody get into CAA, and then they helped me by bringing a script of mine in and said, let's see how it does in the reader's room and if I can do anything for you with it. And they ended up giving a recommendation. This is a different script called The Confession of Lizzie Borden. It was a real small little film about her after she's been exonerated, and years later, somebody's figured out how she did it and kind of goes after her. So it becomes this cat and mouse game, and it's very kind of a psychological thriller, and won a bunch of awards too. So I gave that to CAA. They got a recommend from their reading room, and one of the agents called me and said, I read this script, I love it, and I want one of my clients to make it, and that client is Steven Spielberg. So she took it over and pitched Steven Spielberg on it, and he really liked it. But at the time, he had like 10 other projects he's doing, and they were all kind of meaty, weighty, big, expensive productions. And this was a very small $7 million picture, kind of, something almost like Women Talking or The Banshees of Inisherin, where, it's small and just concentrating on these characters sort of and the dynamics between their controversy and their kind of cat and mouse.
And I'm sure you've heard this talk in Hollywood before too, just to add on to what you're saying, is because I've been in projects where they're like, you know what? In Hollywood, nothing ever dies.
Right.
It just goes on a shelf for a while.
Yeah. I mean, it could come back. You never know. I mean, and sometimes they put it on the shelf intentionally. David Webb Peoples sold Clint Eastwood Unforgiven like a decade before Clint got around to shooting it, saying, well, I think I'm going to wait until I'm old enough to do it. And people said, what, you can't gray your hair? There's makeup. It's called makeup, Clint. But he waited till he was old enough and sort of lived it, I guess. And then it goes on to win Best Picture. But he had to wait 10 years, even though that was a sale to one of the top guys in Hollywood. So you never know. But that begat me writing other stuff, and I still am writing and come very close. I've had a number of scripts optioned. I worked for a couple of Netflix producers, helping with them a couple of projects, including a TV series that they're still trying to sell. So we'll see. But, again, these are things that I love doing. And if I can sell it and it becomes a new career or, great freelance money or whatever, all the power to it. But it's something I just enjoyed doing and wouldn't have done if it wasn't for the fact that it's something that really excited me to do anyway.
Yeah. I mean, it's just another extension of creativity.
Exactly.
And now that we're on that subject.
Sure.
And you've answered all my questions without me asking them.
You should have given me that ahead of time, Tim. I'm too well prepped.
No, that's okay. That's okay. So like me, like I said, I find my creativity when I'm not working, taking walks, biking, woodworking.
Right.
Oh crap! That'd be a great voice to add, or let's explore that avenue. Or so, when and where do you find creativity strikes you? Is there a particular time? Is it when you're cooking, or when you're like me walking, or do you have to really plunk yourself down and make yourself create?
Well, it's a little bit of both. I mean, sometimes when you go into an ad agency, you kind of have to come up with something there. Your partner's there, or the people you're working with. You have a brainstorm. you better be able to come up with something, or at least contribute that helps somebody else come up with something. So for me, it's like a faucet that never ever really turns off. But for me, to your point, I think some of the more inspired stuff comes when I'm not trying too hard, or not trying to think of it, to your point, like when you're out for a walk or in the shower, or, sometimes just clearing your head truly does free your mind and gets the blood percolating. So I think your brain is not clouded or preoccupied with stuff, and your mind is open to thinking of things. But I also believe that everybody is creative. They just don't realize it. Everybody thinks that creativity is coming and sitting down and drawing a picture, or typing out perfect copy or a great story. And it doesn't really work that way. Everybody is creative, whether it's how they put a meal together, or wrap a gift for somebody, or even think of the gift that they're buying for somebody. Sure. There's a creativity in that. So I think there's all versions of it. But I'm with you, Tim. I think a lot of times the best creativity comes when my muse, whatever that is, surprises me. Like I wasn't really thinking it, and then suddenly, boom, something comes in front of me. But it's also why I've always said, when you're a creative person, there's no such thing as downtime, because anything can influence you. And if you think, well, they came into the office and they wasted 2 hours just shooting the bull for 2 hours, you don't know what could come up with in those 2 hours. You might come up with a great idea that you store later, and it leads you to this great idea that solves the client's problem.
Sure.
Even though you're ostensibly just having a water cooler conversation about the previous night's episode of Severance, or, House of the Dragon, or whatever, you never know. So I think creativity can come from anywhere. It can be spurned and catapulted from anywhere. But I'm with you. I think very often when you don't go looking for it, creativity finds you.
Sure. I don't know if you saw the dude he was taking a walk and found acorn shells and started making acorn people.
Oh, nice.
And putting them in the trees, and he leaves them there because he knows the way he photographs them and makes prints of them is so beautiful that people have been buying his artwork like crazy. But he leaves it there for the squirrels to eventually eat.
I love that. Sure, and it's kind of organic that way.
He said he was walking and he saw this idea.
Yeah.
One of my favorite, and it's not the favorite of my campaigns, but I mean, you think about stuff like that, okay? I was booked to do a voice of Apple for Apple Jacks. And it's when and where did they come up with an idea that an apple and a stick of cinnamon named Cinnamon with a Rastafarian voice?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
What? Okay, we've got to sell Apple Jacks. Where? I mean, that's what I mean. And I know you've been doing this for over 30 years.
Sure.
So it's like you got to, and now you're writing movies, and and you're doing the doodles, and gee, where I set these guys? Okay, I'm going to do Colin Farrell, and how am I gonna draw him, and what scene am I going to put him in? So it's a lot of work, and a lot of times you're right. It's like a light bulb moment. It's like, there it is, because I'll start like the old motivational guys would say, problem at the top of the page, or project at the top of the page.
Right.
And then you just keep writing down. Most of the ideas suck and you'll never use them.
Right.
But there's one in there you're like, ooh, that's worth exploring.
Yeah, and a lot of times time and distance is needed. So when you go back on it the day after, you look at something and go like, gosh, I thought I liked that one best, but this one seems to be maybe the more rich territory to cultivate. It's funny because I think, too, a lot of work goes into it. The old cliche about 5% or 10% inspiration, 90% perspiration.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure it's quite that equation, but at the same time, I think that your muse or some sort of wow moment, aha moment kind of hits you, and then you find something to sort of want to build on, like, oh, sure. I just had a great idea for a story, or a great idea to do with something with these acorns, or a great way to approach this character they're asking me to play that's selling Apple Jacks. But then from there, you have to kind of break it down into, okay, how do I make this work? And everything sort of becomes a little bit of, dare I say, equations or science. I mean, I think that's all through art, whether it's beats in a measure, music is very scientific and mathematical in many ways, or drawing is perspective, foreshortening, and writing is being concise, using the right words to convey things, and not giving away everything, and writing sort of in between the lines and stuff like that. But that's where I think the fun of it comes too, because a great idea is a great idea, but then you have to do something with it. And how do you bring it to fruition, whether it's a 60-second radio spot that you're doing the voiceover for, or, a feature-length 2-hour movie that requires 120 pages.
Yeah.
It's all kind of the same exercise. Like, I've got an idea here, I've got talent to do it, but now I just have to kind of apply it. And the way to do that is to not be overwhelmed by the Herculean nature of like, oh my God, I've got to write 120 pages, or I'm the guy who's going to be the spokes character for this whole thing. Pressure, pressure. It's like, no, break it down. Like, what voices can you do? What kind of things do you know make you funny? What kinds of funny rhythms are there in here? There's all those things helping you really become a coach of it, and move the players around. They may be your players. You are the player coach, but really you're sort of managing it all. And I think that's what a lot of creativity is.
Oh, sure. And, from a voiceover's perspective, it's picking apart and embodying the character.
Of course.
It's like picking it apart. Okay, they're looking for this. I'll give them this because that's what they're asking for. But then I'm going to ask them if it's okay if they let me go out on a limb here.
Sure.
Because as soon as I see something, my brain goes to immediately not just solving a problem, but bringing whatever you're asking me to do to life, especially if it's character.
Right.
To bring him to life. How big is he? How small is he? Is he fat? Is he thin? Did he have a shitty life? Did he have a good life? All those things come into play. Did he smoke? Did he drink? All those. It's
right.
all coming at me. There's like the sun comes to the earth. It comes to
and
me
Tim,
that
because
fast.
of you're a student of the arts, you're a student of humankind, you're a student of human character. All that stuff is plain. It's like your arsenal, your resume, your expertise that you're bringing to it. So when an idea pops in your head, like, what if I went this way? I zigged while maybe you're asking me just to zag. It's because that's an informed perspective that you have, and you're going to bring something else extra to it. And that's also, I think, separates the good talent from the great talent, because great talents are thinking, what else can I do? What other way is there in this? Is there something that somehow pops into my head as a creative idea that may make it a little bit extra? At the very least, it challenges the material or the person who wrote it to say yes and, as opposed to no, it's this one way. Well sometimes it is, but very seldom is it.
Yeah, that's improv training.
That's right.
And it's you taking risks to say to the client, I think this is what's going to sell your product.
For sure.
Or for you saying, all right, this movie's never been done before. I love monster movies and I'm going to try this. And just go out there and just let it go. I've got a great book for you to read if you've never read it, and I'm guessing you have. It's by Steven Pressfield.
I don't know.
It's called The War of Art.
I've heard of it, but I have not read it. But I would love to read that. Yeah.
It's this thick. And you can literally read a page a day. He suggests you read a page a day.
Oh, interesting.
And one of my favorite things, and you drop the word, every day I start to write. He said, I have to walk out to my studio, and I open the door, but I let the muse in first. He goes, whenever I walk through the door myself first and close the door to my muse, I have a crap day writing. He said, when I open the door and allow the muse in first, it's just like, it's otherworldly. It's not coming from me. I don't know where it comes from, but that's what's happening.
Sometimes I think your muse is maybe your conscience that is built by experience. I know how to do this, I'm going to do this, but then your muse says, yeah, but you do this too. You're not thinking about that right now, but think about this, or find a different angle on it and stuff like that. One of the things that I think is also a great thing, whether you're an actor or writer, any kind of creative person, is not always to do something different just because it's different and it hasn't been done before. Those are certainly, motivations that certainly compel a lot of people. But I think a lot of times when you can find something that gives a slight different spin to it, like I've always said to people when they sit down to brainstorm and they go, oh, I'm supposed to come up with ideas. You can do the list of words, and those are great. And there's all kinds of different exercises. But one of the things I often tell them, and I said, I think this is true in any kind of art you see, whether it's music or advertising or posters or scripts or whatever, is sometimes people take one from column A and they put it together with something from column B that normally wouldn't go together. And I think that's true of food and music. It's like, when they would sample things in rap and like, really, we're going to sample this, but it works, somehow you've made it into something new.
Right.
Well, I'll give you an example. And it's one of the famous examples from advertising when you and I were both starting out. They did that Tide demonstration where it was to opera music, and
Joe B.
Cerny came out and sort of mimed this dirty handkerchief, put it into a martini mixer, shook it up with the Tide, and then came out, it was clean. It's like, that's a product demo, the oldest trick in the book for advertising. And yet put with classical music, so it elevated it, put with a sort of monosyllabic, mute, sort of straight presenter who is not a mom, but this middle-aged guy with a mustache and glasses. He, looked like a Pringles can almost, often wearing a bow tie. And then, oh, wait a minute, we're not putting it in the washing machine. We're putting it in a martini mixer. Yes. And it broke through. And it's like, that's a different way. It's the same thing. Cold water, ice, water and the cheer. And they shook it. And here's the different result, but from the same result, but from a different demonstration. So that was just a different way of looking at stuff. And I think the more you can sort of say, how would they do this? I remember when Jonathan Price did the Infinity campaign, and it sold a ton of Infinities, and he came out and for 30 seconds talked about that goddamn clock in the dash. And it's like, nobody ever talked about that. It was always the stunt driver on the slick highway and the mountains making it look glamorous. It's like, no, this is a sexy little clock that you want to look at as you're driving. And that was one of the features. And there was another feature. And suddenly this is a different way of doing a car ad where it's actually talking about these little features that have nothing to do with rack and pinion steering or, four-wheel drive or beautiful Sunday drives and with your sweetie next to you. It was just like, no, these are features of the thing that hadn't been done before, a different way of selling a car. Gets attention. Those things are often the best ways of doing it.
It's emotional.
Always a good way to start off creativity. If you're writing a romantic story, I want you to write a love story. Well, don't write it about two beautiful people who've got money and everything between them. Write them about the ugliest two people in the room or crazy people or where would they find love there where they shouldn't find love. I mean, those would be the things I would challenge anyone if you're wanting to write something that's going to get people's attention is write that. If you're going to write a Christmas movie for Lifetime, and there's a lot of those out there and a lot of them are good, some of them not so good, but it's like, what kind of thing can you do that's not a parody of Scrooge? You got to find two different people for whatever reason are there somewhere in a Christmas thing, whether it's The Office or a high school reunion or the old hometown or whatever. The parents were marrying each other and they somehow fall in love, even though
they're
I
still love the Christmas Story.
Exactly, you got to find the different ways in it. So I think creativity is oftentimes, to your point, letting that muse in first. Because if you walk in with your rational self, you're going to probably gravitate towards all the things you've done before or that work.
Right. And a lot of times after a while, they don't work anymore.
Right. Or they do, but people get ahead of it and they tune out because I know it's coming. I'm 5 minutes ahead of you. Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to watch this commercial. I know all this. I've seen this story 1,000 times.
Well, I don't even have to ask my last question because you basically just said, the last question is there some piece of advice you'd like to give our listeners? Be it about what they should or shouldn't worry about, be it to an actor or another creative person like yourself? Somebody that's just getting started. I mean, but you just kind of gave a masterclass with that last answer of,
We can leave it there if you want. I will say one last thing, and I don't mean to echo an article, but it's funny that you ask it because it was something that I just wrote in my latest essay for Pipeline Artist Magazine, and that is, it's a new year, so kind of approach it with, clean slate and all that. And basically, what I'm quoting, I quote Socrates and the famous screenwriter William Goldman, who wrote Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Marathon Man, and adapted All the President's Men. And basically they said the same thing. Goldman said, in Hollywood, nobody knows anything because you can never be sure what's going to be successful. And of course, Socrates says, as I get older, I realize I know nothing. So I said, don't let what you think is going to sell or what you tried before and failed or what somebody's telling you to do or this is the flavor of the month or whatever like that. Go in there and write, again, what amuses you. Write like sing like nobody's listening, as the cliche goes, but write what
dance like nobody's watching.
Right. Write what you would want to watch. Write what the story that you think, why hasn't somebody ever done this? I would love to see this. I think this could be interesting because you never know. If you have passion for it and that comes out and you can see it because you've invested yourself and time and energy into it, God knows probably somebody else will. But at the very least, you've been true to yourself rather than just playing a guessing game like, well, shit, that sold last year. How come they didn't buy my version of it? That's no way to be creative. I think the creative person has to really get in bed with that muse. Let them walk in the room first, get in the bed first, but get in bed with that muse rather than saying, okay, I'm going to put these shackles on. I'm going to not just write a sentence and then rewrite it. I'm not going to just draw a line and then erase it because I immediately want to make it better. Write it straight through or write it in a fever dream and then go back and rewrite and worry about making it perfect. But get your ideas and your creativity and your juices going and get that muse on the paper because there's always time to rewrite, but don't edit yourself.
Right. Well, and don't critique yourself. This self-critic
Exactly.
just kills great ideas.
Everybody is going to say no.
Nobody's going to like it.
Yep.
I don't know.
And you're going to hear 1,000 no's in your life. Sorry, Tim,
Sure.
we loved you, but you were second choice for this assignment. Damn it. Or Jeff, we loved it, but not really for us.
That's my
whatever.
life, my friend.
Of course, it's everybody's life in the creative business. But if you tell yourself no, then you've just got a cacophony of them. Why would you ever tell yourself, no, don't do that? No, do that. If that is what you want to write and you think that's cool, don't let somebody say, oh my God, another Frankenstein movie. Don't write that. Maybe you've got a better version of it. Write it. Show them otherwise.
The Franken love story.
Ooh, there you go.
Tonight on Lifetime.
See, there you go. It's just, there you go. That's the equation. Franken plus something else. Franken love story. Franken hooker. I mean, there's always been,
Ooh, there we go.
And that was a very
If you
popular
wrote
movie
that.
back in the 80s. I don't know, but it's a cult classic.
That's hilarious. And when people come to me, especially seasoned vets, they're like, hey man, can you help me? I've lost touch, and I need to make something that I'm not working, blah blah blah. I'm like, there's nothing I can teach you. We can find new avenues for you.
Yes.
And maybe that's all that you've dropped out.
Yep.
But there's nothing I can teach you. You know what to do. But let's find some new stuff that you didn't know you had in you.
For sure.
And
That's
see
great.
if that works. And we'll ditch the stuff that doesn't, and we'll keep the stuff that does. It's you. It's just a different part of you.
Yeah.
And
just try it. You may not know it's you.
Right.
He's asking, is this you? Maybe not. We'll find
Right.
out. And indeed, with a talent like you, Tim, it very often was you.
Right.
You just didn't know that you could do that too.
Right.
I love it.
All right, sir. Now, the last thing I like to do with you, and this is what I was telling you, these are
All
the
right.
lightning.
Oh, the
these are
rapid
lightning
fire.
round
The
questions.
lightning round. All right.
Okay. If you weren't doing this, what would you be doing?
Boy, that's interesting. I do like teaching. My parents were teachers, so that's always been sort of interesting to me. And I guess I kind of try to do that to some degree in some of the work I do, maybe even a little bit here. I do like acting to some degree, though. I don't know if I would have the patience for that, because if I could be good for the role, and then they'd say, "Oh, Jeff, you're too short or too blonde or too gray or too unattractive or whatever," and then I wouldn't get the role. It's like, shit, man, I did a great audition. I should have gotten that role, but I didn't because I'm not tall enough. Damn it. But that's intriguing. I think that world, your world, Tim, is very intriguing.
Yeah, but that's why I hide behind a microphone, because I ain't pretty enough for no camera.
Actually, you're very handsome, and you are handsome enough for the camera. But you can be as handsome as you want to be, or as ugly as you want to be.
Still not be the right
behind
guy.
the mic. That's right. He's a Rastafarian serial eater. Did you know that?
So the script, just so you know, the ask on that was, we want him to be kind of rough and tough, but kind of like a rough voice guy that's just a little slightly unhinged. And they said the other one's going to be a tall, skinny stick of cinnamon with dreadlocks. And we've already got the guy picked. He's from Trinidad.
Oh. And it was because of the word mon,
cinnamon.
Right? That was the whole joke. Cinnamon. I'm cinnamon.
And I was Apple. And I said,
Mon.
okay. I said, I'm going to blend two guys together and you see what you think. I think I was one of the last guys of the day. And I came out and I said, I'm blending Danny DeVito with the freneticism of George Costanza. So, so this kind of came out,
That's good. That's great.
And he was like, no, you cannot take my apples. And it was, I forget what the whole thing was. And
nice.
By the time I was done, I looked at, he was literally slumped in his chair, belly laughing.
Oh, I love it.
And I said,
that's great.
Is that a good belly laugh? They go, dude, you're the guy. I was just
that's
like,
wonderful.
And it ran for like a decade. So I took a risk.
And now Tim is living in his own studio
in
Tampa, Florida. But he's only in the top 20, folks. Shit.
Okay, so where do you see our crazy business in the next 5 years?
I think it's going to continue to be smaller, but I think they're going to find new ways to connect to people, because I think so much of that is changing. Even social media isn't quite the thing it used to be. And I think, again, it's that river that we talked about before we went on air where, it's a lot of changes. And I think idea people will always be needed. is it going to continue to go more in-house and smaller? Maybe, but I think the good people will still make a living in it, and they will find it. It might just be in different forms. It may be in smaller factions or different versions of an agency that we didn't see 30 years ago. But then again, I would argue that a lot of the agencies today aren't what we saw 30 years ago. So,
yeah, it seems to be an ever-evolving thing.
It is. Yep.
And new ways to reach out to people to make the products we're selling memorable.
Right. That's right. That's right.
And to make them a brand name like Apple,
right?
Like McDonald's. Yep. I mean, you look at a logo and it's like, okay, it's that. Yep. And to associate care, trust, and quality with it.
Well, that's the thing is you have to be a quality product because if you want to stick around for a while, you can't betray the public. You have to be
That's right.
delivering them the goods and being good about it. And if you, let the quality falter or you decide to cheapen it by, okay, now we've got them, I can make a lesser product and they'll still buy it.
Right.
No, don't count on that. People figure it out today. And everybody can tell the story everywhere these days. So you can't really hide.
That's right. You can't BS people anymore.
Yeah, that's right.
And you're right. If that goes social, that your product isn't what a bunch of people saying your product is, kind of pulled the wool over your eyes, it's going to go away quickly.
For sure.
All right. And the very last question, sir, is what do you see yourself doing in the next 5 years?
It's funny. I used to think of that all the time. And in the last few years, maybe as I'm getting older, I try not to think too much about that. I mean, I have some thoughts where I'd like to be. I would like to sell a script. I would like to continue to, have fun in advertising. I would like to, sell more and more artwork, maybe to the point where that would be something that I never actually retire from. I'm still 85 and I'm drawing that for people or for magazines or whoever would buy them. But honestly, I'll be frank with you, Tim, I try not to think that way because I find that in some respects that turns more to worry. Like, gee, I want to do that. I'm not doing it yet. What's my plan? I'm behind. I better get my ass in gear. So for me, it's like, what is tomorrow? Or what is the next week hold for me? Oh, it's these things. That's manageable. And sort of, I know it's cliche. It sounds very Buddhist or whatever, but wherever you go, there you are. I don't mind where I am, and I don't mind where I could be going. I'll see where it takes me. I would love to still kind of get that crack at Hollywood, but like you said, stuff goes under stacks of other stuff and maybe comes out 10 years later, or maybe it goes nowhere, even though it seems like it's going to be the sure thing. No one knows anything, as Goldman said.
Right. But you can have fun along the way.
Well, that's the thing is for me, like I'm having fun doing all the things I'm doing. And whether they're elevated forms of success or more success as the years come by, we'll see. But for right now, whether I'm doing it and it's fun, whether it's, not selling yet or selling somewhat or, in its current state, it's still fun for me. So I found things that I really have always liked doing, and I can kind of live with the amount of success. Maybe I don't have Tim DiDabbo money with 2 homes, but I'm content where I'm at, and a lot of those things are very pleasing to me. I sort of have reined in my expectations.
But I don't have Steven Spielberg and
he didn't make it yet.
Antonio Banderas calling me.
That's right, but it's not like I'm getting together with them over the holidays. Damn it! Why doesn't Antonio call me?
I'd be a Fableman. I could be a Fableman.
I tell you, I'm as funny as Seth Rogen. You can probably do him. Except that'll kill your voice for the next week.
Seth. Yeah. I gotta
By the way, Tim, I got to ask you, what is your favorite character to do? Like, do you have a type of character to do? Because you can do so many, and you have a great natural voice too. But I mean, what character they're giving me this kind of guy to do today. That's going to be fun.
Golly, it's like you. It's like asking you the 5-year question. It's the one that I didn't know I had in me.
Oh, okay, sure.
Like,
I've done it before.
Apple thing.
Yeah.
It's the one that you say, okay, Tim, this is what we have. Come up with, make him come to life.
Sure.
Or come up with something.
Right.
Or the one I took a risk on.
Yeah, for sure.
I booked the voice of a robot for a Spider-Man cartoon.
Nice.
And I gave him a non-robotic voice. And I think that's why they booked me.
I love that. Like just sort of a regular voice that you wouldn't expect from a robot.
I was a little wind-up flipping mouse.
Nice.
And I don't know why, but I gave him a British accent, and they booked me for it.
That's fantastic.
So, I mean, it's just stupid little things like that.
But it's a different way to think of it, not the typical squeaky mouse voice, but somebody who's small, but sort of like England. Now we're small.
No, he's very proper.
But we're still.
Norton was very proper.
Yes, we're small, but still important, just like a mouse.
No, you're so silly.
I love that. That's very
that's
infectious.
basically was Norton.
Fantastic. That's great. See, you watched the cartoons too, and it turned you into a voice guy, and it turned me into a cartoon guy. So
I would imagine you must have watched BJ and the Dirty Dragon.
Oh, all kinds of that. I can. If you want to do a whole podcast sometime, and we'll just talk about old cartoon shows. Let's do it. I can talk about the theme songs and the characters.
You put me on your show.
Well, but I don't have the show anymore. So see, I just have to be a guest, a special guest.
Okay, that'd be fine. Talking Tunes.
Oh, there's a new show, Talking Tunes. That's fantastic. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen,
Jeffrey York, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much, Jeff, for joining me. You are just as much of a delight as you've always been, and as brilliant as you've always been. And I'm so happy that you've done so much more than just artwork and advertising.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and let's do this again. I'd love to talk more about anything with you, including tunes or whatever else you want. But good luck with you, and again, continued success, my friend. You're a great guy.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Do the same. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Jeff. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Jeff York. Did I tell you? Mind blown? Mine is artist, movie critic, screenwriter, and all-around incredibly kind man. Thank you again, Jeff, for your time, your brilliance. You are just a shiny star. And if you want to read about Jeff, read his movie critiques, and see some of his brilliant artwork, you can find his website at theestablishingshot.org, theestablishingshot.org. And oh gee, it looks like it's time for us to go, so until next time, my friends, I sign off as I always do. Remember, find your flow. Bye-bye.